Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. In today's special video, we're going to be talking about a post-release of Xilonen and really figuring out, now that she has been out for about a week or so, well actually more than a week, is she, just how good is she? Is she on par with Furina, who's arguably one of the best supports in the game up to this point? Is Xilonen better? Is she worse? So let's really just talk about that and a few other things with Xilonen and just her value in the meta and how people would rank her. So Vixen, I actually want to get asking you first, what kind of, because I know you did a personal video actually on Xilonen on your personal channel. What are the, I guess, selling points, the main selling points with Xilonen in your opinion?
So I guess when overall looking at a post-release analysis, what I would really look at overall for characters, first and foremost, I think a lot of people kind of look past it, but is how does the character actually feel? I know a lot of people actually like or dislike characters, even if they're good, just based on how they actually feel as a character. For instance, Mualani puts out pretty good nuke numbers and is a pretty good character, but I've heard, at least from other people, that some people aren't a fan of her just purely because of how she is in a playstyle. So I've thought about that and I've thought, okay, well, looking at Xilonen, I already extremely like her. Her skill is very easy to get off. Getting the elemental resistance shred is very easy. And at the same time of doing that, you're also getting the elemental damage bonus from her 4-piece set. Very similar to what Kazuha does. So overall with gameplay, she's a very fun character in battle as well as outside. Whether that's jumping up and down of a cliff or using her Night Soul just mechanic to get around Natlan, extremely fun. She also has different interesting ideas to kind of get around. It's also pretty cool. But I think overall with her gameplay, I would say it's pretty top par for looking overall at a character. So I think that brings up a very high level of satisfactory pulling for a lot of people. After that though, I think the next thing is to look at is, kind of combat. How, once again, in combat is she actually useful for though? And once again, like I said, all you're doing is immediately popping your skill and then hitting once or twice on an enemy and then immediately either using your ultimate, your burst, or switching over to another character. And at that point, once again, it's kind of very similar, like I said, to Kazuha. Kazuha kind of gets in, he swirls, he gets out, giving the 4-piece from his buff for the resistance shred, and then giving the passive talent buff. So an easy character to use, but not necessarily, I don't think people play Kazuha necessarily because he's fun, more or less because of how well he is as a character. So I don't know, Ryft, what do you at least take from that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to mention. I do think, for me personally, I actually did like Kazuha for play style. I didn't have to, for me, he didn't have to be amazing for me to like him. And I think for Xilonen, it's the same thing. She is just very easy to use. Yes, there's a lot of, descriptions going on, and you read the skill, the burst. There's a lot going on, and so it can be kind of daunting at first look. But in reality, and kind of like a TLDR, it's very simple to play. You pop the skill, like you said, you do one or two normals if you have the sword to get the maximum buff on that, very simple. And then you just switch off, use the burst if you have it, and even then, even though her burst has two different ways of working, it can do damage, it can do healing based on your team setup. That's just the thing. You don't still have to overly think about what you're doing. It's just, okay, I have my team set up and okay, it's going to deal damage in this team or it's going to heal in this team. I don't have to actually think about that as I'm playing the game. It's just going to do its job and do what I need it to do. And so with that, like you said, very easy to character to play, and I think a lot of people would gravitate towards that kind of thing. Now, in terms of power, I kind of want to know your opinion actually, and I think a lot of people want to know, where does she sit in terms of the top 3, maybe top 5 for supports? Most people know Furina is pretty much the best character in the game. You have Kazuha, even characters like Yelan, Nahida is a little bit more Dendro specific, but a lot of these characters are just brought up for being the best at simply what they do. And so I think Xilonen obviously makes it to the top of this chart, or the top of these, top 5 characters in general. Where would you think she sits specifically? Do you think Furina's still number 1, or actually just what's your opinion in kind of ranking those?
So yeah, I agree. I still think Furina still is an extremely good character. Obviously, one of the best supports we have in the game, if not the best pre-Xilonen. When we talk about Nahida, you can't ever forget about her. Yes, she is Dendro specific, but she's the Dendro Archon. So you that was the whole point. We got into Samara, we actually unlocked using that element actually. People kind of forget about that sometimes. We didn't get to have Dendro before that. That was the first time we got to use Dendro. So to have the Archon force those reactions to happen was extremely good and is still extremely good to this day. Plus the EM buff that she can give is absolutely insane for a lot of other characters as well. Obviously, besides that, we have Kazuha, who has reigned as one of the best supports in the game for a very long time. Like I said before, Xilonen is basically him plus healing. That's really it. They both give elemental damage bonus at a high amount. They both give elemental resistance shred at a high amount. The great thing about Xilonen, though, which can possibly push her past him, is that she can be put in Geo teams, and she can be put in, obviously Geo teams above him, and she has healing above him as well. So obviously we can kind of check Kazuha kind of from being better, right? So she clears Kazuha, right? And then next we can look at Nahida or Yelan. Yelan is an extremely good character, normal attack specific character though. So if a character doesn't use normal attacks, for instance, Neuvillette, she falls out. Other characters that like to do big damage hits necessarily aren't too fond of using her too much, unless they are, once again, normal attack specific focused. Once again, looking at Chaska, actually a character in the future, using charge attacks, Yelan gets thrown off. So we can clear Yelan, and Nahida, like you talked about, was Dendro specific. We can clear her. So now we look at the top 2 characters for supports in the game, being Xilonen and Furina. Now, this is going to be a very controversial topic because I think both of us have very interesting ways of putting this. Overall, I like Xilonen more, and I think that is going to be probably the hottest take I'll ever have in this video game. I think Xilonen barely, and I mean barely, clears Furina. Xilonen cannot be used in Animo and Dendro teams, which is why characters like Zhao get to use Furina, and Xilonen can't be there. It's the reason why Alhaitham, another top tier DPS, can be used with Furina, and Xilonen is absolutely useless for that team for Alhaitham specifically. So because of that, does that mean that Furina's or better? Well, I don't necessarily think so. Yes, she has more capabilities, but I think you actually said this before we started recording. We think, at least from what I've seen, the buffs that Xilonen can give are just that much more useful, and she can give a buff as well as heal at the same time. I'm not meaning that Furina can't do that, but usually you want the character to do some damage if they're meant to. So Furina, you have to choose between damage or healing mode, and kind of you get to do that with Xilonen's burst, but Xilonen can already be on field separate from her healing burst to do some extra damage. So I just feel like, for me, Xilonen is better. Now, once again, we're talking first and second place at like this much. Like, Xilonen is barely eking out over Furina. But once again, that's just my personal opinion. So Ryft, either tear that apart or go ahead and join the dark side with me. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a very based opinion. I think when looking at simply just the power of the buffing that Furina and Xilonen provide for the team, it seems like when you watch gameplay, from what I've seen, from probably what you felt owning the character and testing out different things, because you have both characters, I think Xilonen's buff is definitely more noticeable. It seems to be a lot higher, just from what people see, okay? Once again, from what I see. When we look at the Neuvillette team, Neuvillette, Furina, and then you also throw Xilonen in there, Neuvillette's doing, like, from your experience, 90,000 charge attack damage every single tick. And I've seen other people out there, breaching that 100k per tick. That's just absolutely insane. And no, guys, that's, like, not any crazy leyline buffs, not any events. This is, like, 12-3, no external buffs. This is full team buffs only. And so that's just crazy. I mean, with Furina, Neuvillette's, still hitting the 40 to 50. If you have a really awesome build, 60,000. That's a pretty considerable buff in and of itself, whereas without Furina, that same Neuvillette's probably hitting like 30 to 40. It's so almost double damage. Like, it's an insane buff from Furina that you are getting. Amazing synergy. I think Furina still is better specifically for Neuvillette. Just the synergy there is undeniable. But Xilonen's just taking that and she's an insane catalyst for damage. And any damage dealer you have on your account that you just want to see deal more damage, Xilonen is pretty much going to be the answer. Furina is also the same answer. Now, the thing I like about Furina and Xilonen, while we're trying to talk about between them and like, okay, which one's better, the other thing is they're actually really, really good together because Furina wants that healer and Xilonen can provide that for the team, allowing you even a third slot for just another damage dealer from off field, or just maybe even another healer, another buffer. It's a very comfortable duo, kind of like, when we see Furina Jean, Furina Shan Yun. those are good duos because Jean and Xianyun are healers, and Furina likes that. So you're building up Furina's buff even faster. Xilonen's gonna be doing the same thing provided she's on heal mode, which you're gonna want 2 other elements for her to get that conversion for her to heal, which you should be getting. Furina's also counting for one of those, and either your DPS or that extra slot that's still not filled in the team, you know, you're going to fill that, right? So use them together if you have them both. I think that's going to be just really high value for many, many different teams. For Neverlet himself, of course. But going back to comparing them between each other, Furina and Xilonen, which one's actually better? I think I really like, once again, how you put it, Vixen. It's obviously going to come down to the team. What kind of team, you know, actually wants Xilonen over Furina? I think one such character would be Arlecchino. Furina is not bad for Arlecchino. You have the Hydro application. Furina has a lot of damage in and of herself. But, you know, I think Yelan's just a little bit, you know, just makes it a little bit more sense for a character like Arlecchino. It does save your Furina for an opposite side. Xilonen, I think you're just getting more use out of. Now, once again, Xilonen can't heal your Arlecchino, but the damage buff that Xilonen is giving is just absolutely insane. I don't know, maybe Vixen, would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, going back over everything you talked about, actually, looking at the 2 characters together, my Neverlet, when I had Neverlet, Furina, Kazuha, and Baiju, actually, which was the best team basically we had in the game at one point in time, it was hitting, I think, 60, maybe 70k in the Abyss. So that's peaking. And I mean, I had to get a normal and charge attack buff. I had to make sure I had max stacks on Furina, which Baiju could obviously help out with pretty easily. But also you have other things going on with, you know, other parts of the character's kits, like Baiju's helping out with that. Neverlet's changing his HP a lot, so he's helping with stacks because he's healing and changing the HP and whatnot. Overall, the team was extremely good. Now, once you're able to crack 90Ks though in 12-3 as something that's not necessarily something that's easy to really do, you guys can go actually, and I mean, my stream is literally up for you guys to go check that and just like find it. You can see where I actually was doing terrible. Like, I was not doing good in that Abyss. I was dorking around. I was having fun. I was playing on like my controller. I didn't even care. I wasn't even using my keyboard and mouse. That's how like I didn't care about playing the game as I did. At that time, that point in time though, using Xilonen instead of Baiju, like you said, the healer allowed me to obviously have the heals, but that buff, basically having 2 Kazuhas in one, plus the heals, was just absolutely insane and brought it to another level. Talking about Arlecchino, my Xilonen video, if you guys go and watch that, in the team section, how it starts out, I tried which my 2 best teams were a Vape team with Yelan, Kazuha, and Bennett, and an Overload team with Yai, Miko, Shrevers, and Bennett, with Arlecchino as a DPS. I think I maxed in my Vape team a 186k hit. I will check that later, and I guess we'll figure that out. But if you guys watch that, I think it was 186k. I cleared, I think, like 236k or something when I had Xilonen instead of Yelan. Now, Yelan gives a passive buff over time that helps the damage increase, but I mean, I was clearing numbers way better, and my Overload team actually did a little bit worse than the Vape team. And this is just in a regular domain that had nothing to do with really helping me too much. So I think Xilonen just gives such a crazy buff that, once again, like you said, Ryft, depending on the character, really means a lot. But honestly, it's so insane that you sometimes don't even have to worry about who the damage dealer is, unless, obviously, of course, they are not one of the core 4 or Geo.
I know, I totally agree. It's like, and the other thing is, it's so instant. You just pop your skill, do a couple normal switch off, and you have this buff right there at 100% effectiveness, and it lasts pretty long too. So like, it's not anything like Yelan where it's working up, not that that's bad, or Furina that's also working up to its maximum potential. These are all good and all, but Xilonen's just like, you want practically what feels like 50 to 100% more damage, here you go. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, it's just, it's amazing. And like you're saying, the only characters that cannot take use of Xilonen's buffing are your Animo DPSs, your Animo characters, and your Dendro characters, which isn't really a bad thing, because if you're building a hyper carry team around an Animo character, you have characters like Farazan, and then just use Furina. Like, there still are options that are pretty much like already best in slot. Dendro teams want Nahida, so they have their place. Xilonen is just, for these other 5 elements, pretty much best in slot. I mean, now we haven't really like talked about mono Geo or just Geo teams in general. I mean, probably because it's pretty obvious with teams like that Xilonen is very much best in slot for that kind of stuff, because her damage buff is just it's going to work for that kind of team. She's going to even deal some damage there too. I think the main thing to take away is that Xilonen is definitely, if she's not first place support in the game at this point, because of Furina's existence, she's easy second place. And I think it's very, I just think that first and second place are very contesting, and they contest based on which team you're playing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Because, for instance, I mean, and that's the thing, we always pit characters against each other, right? So I'm sure we're going to get raved in the comments about it. But once again, taking the two characters and putting them together. So another amazing DPS in the game. Obviously, we've already talked about Neuvillette and him using both of them, almost cracking 100k, if not more. Probably if you have a C2 Neuvillette or something. But if you're probably cracking, 100k, that's insane. Never mind if we're talking about a character like Navia. I mean, Navia with Xilonen, with Bennett, and with Furina as well. I mean, there's no Kazuha in the team because he's practically useless for Navia. But yeah, you're still getting an insane buff. I mean, Navia literally is hitting like a truck already, and then you're just like, oh, by the way, instead of Chiori, instead of Zhongli, where they don't really help out too much besides helping for the double Geo resonance, by the way, now we're going to drop the enemy's Geo resistance by 30%. And everybody in Geo, I think, has been kind of, if you're a Geo main and you like Geo, you like, Noelle, you like Ito, whoever, you kind of got shoved to the side when it comes to characters like Shanyun, Jean, Kazuha, because Viridescent is useless on them. But now you have a character that can give you a resistance shred very easily. So I think overall, you have characters like Chiori, you have these other characters that were helpful for Navia, but now you have a character that can be an actual dedicated support, healer, buffer for Navia and make it actually just an insanely strong team as well. So the buff to Geo, I think, is people aren't recognizing because Geo's not as loved, but there is a significant buff there, and that also just shows to the testament of Xilonen's strength, personally, to me.
Yeah, I think Xilonen was kind of the last, I don't want to say nail in the coffin because it kind of has a bad connotation, but what I'm trying to get at here is that she was the finishing touch to, I guess, quote, fixing Geo, because when you look at the Geo roster now, it honestly doesn't seem that bad. Navia is one of the better DPSs in the game. She just hits hard. Zhongli has always had utility, and he still is the best at what he does. He can have a little bit of damage. He's still a good character. He does offer some shredding for resistances, so he is technically increasing damage of whatever team you put him in. And so that's just good. You still have Chiori surprised me when I did eventually get her. She actually surprised me because I'm hitting well over 50k from off field. Like, she's just a damage dealer and she does good at it. So she doesn't feel bad at all, especially if you use her in the right teams. The synergy's there. She's a good character. And then you have the other character here, Xilonen. And I think she's the finishing touch that ultimately fixed Geo for what it really needed. Maybe not ultimately. That's not to say that Geo still needs some other things. There are some things out there, maybe reactions we want to see that don't exist. Like, we don't see a reaction between Cryo and Dendra as just an example. But there's just things that could be there. And so with the future ahead of us, who knows, a future character could still create new things. And so that's always just an exciting thing. I think Geo is actually in a better spot than it used to be. And I think it's evidenced by this Abyss. This Abyss, yes, is a little bit easier than normal, but it also did in the second half place you against a lot of Geo-specific shielded kind of enemies, to where if you don't have a Geo character at all, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. You're going to have a little bit more just Unga Boonga power to just get through those Geo shields, which for I think most players isn't going to be too much of an issue. But I think you guys get my point. With Xilonen, I think Geo is actually in a good spot because one of the best supports in the game now, arguably, is a Geo character.
Yeah, and actually going back to that, I've heard from a lot of people in our Discord. So if you guys, by the way, a quick link, if you guys haven't check by our Discord, you guys can go ahead and do so if I don't trip up on my words. And then also thinking about that specifically with the Spiral Abyss, actually, from what I've heard from people there, as well as people outside of our Discord as well, people are saying the Abyss is absolutely sending them into next week. Some aren't even trying floor 12 at all. People are actually feeling like this is just too much. So possibly another reason to pull Xilonen. Possibly. If you guys already have her, obviously I think at this point, this is normally reserved for her to pull, not to pull, but I think at this point, just, is she worth the pull? Yes. I mean, if you ask any other person, is Furina worth a pull? Doro is a big person who's an advocate for her I'm sure there are other people, you know, Jello, there are people like the Jonathan. There are people who are just like big content creators that are saying, yes, okay, Furina is a must pull almost every single time she's on the banner if you don't have her. I think Xilonen is going to be one of those characters. She's a borderline must pull because most of the time your DPSs you're going to gravitate towards are going to really be happy to be able to use her.
And you'll definitely notice the damage. It's just insane.
Yeah, and there's just that huge spike of power that you're not going to see anywhere else. Unless, of course, you combine literally the 3 best supports in the game possibly, which is Xilonen, Furina, and Kazuha. Change that rotation of numbers however you want. It doesn't matter. But either way, an extremely good character at the end of the day. That's what the kind of what the whole video is about. So, but with all that out of the way then, guys, if you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you guys are like, you know what, you guys are off your rockers, shut up, bro. No, Furina's still the best. Go ahead and let us know in the comments. Let us know why you think it is. And if you've done the testing to see the actual damage differences, if you're a Jeff 2.0, go ahead and let us know and tell us what we did wrong. Sure. I personally still like Xilonen more. I think Furina is still an amazingly goated character and still one of the best supports we have in the game. But I think Xilonen has her own right at the top as well. So if you guys disagree with us, once again, go ahead and let us know. If you think we're crazy, go ahead and let us know. Also, if you think we actually did a good job, go ahead and let us know that too. That's kind of nice. We need a little lift up every now and again. So anyways, with all that out of the way, thank you guys for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Check out our Discord as well. We'll see you guys in the next video.